समुद्रस्य हिमाद्रश्चैव दक्षिणं वर्षं तद् भारतं नाम भारतीयत्र सन्तति।
Namaste. Welcome to today's episode of Itihasa. Itihasa is intricately connected with dharma, and an important component of our dharma has been Tantra. Tantra has not been always very clearly understood. Tantra has often been misunderstood. There are wrong impressions about Tantra. As you can see, I am standing at an art gallery which portrays the influence Tantra has had on art. It has paintings by famous painters who have been influenced by Tantra. In today's episode, we will learn a little bit more about Tantra.
सहस्रसहस्रादि संवत्सरा पूर्वं नरज्ञान उद्धारणाय समर्पितम् आदियोगिराध्यं सप्तर्षिभ्यो बोधितम् अतिश्रेष्ठम् इदं विशालं विज्ञानम्।
मानव में कितनी शक्ति है? इसका उत्तर विज्ञान के पास आज भले ही ना हो, लेकिन आने वाले समय में अध्यात्म और विज्ञान मिलकर इसका उत्तर देंगे। जैसे जैसे विज्ञान का विकास होता जा रहा है, वो अध्यात्म की ओर बढ़ता जा रहा है। धीरे धीरे इस बात की व्याख्या भी होती जा रही है कि मनुष्य अनंत शक्ति का स्वामी है। उसका जीवित शरीर अक्षय ऊर्जा का भंडार है। जिस सृष्टि और प्रकृति के बीच हम उत्पन्न हुए और रह रहे हैं, वो पंच महाभूतों से बनी है। हम भी इन्हीं 5 तत्वों से निर्मित हैं। एक तरह से मानव शरीर संपूर्ण सृष्टि की प्रतीकात्मक प्रतिकृति ही है, उसका एक रूप है। मनुष्य के शरीर के सिस्टम और सृष्टि के सिस्टम या तंत्र के बीच एक साम्य है। इस साम्य को समझना, उसकी अनुभूति करना और जीवन मृत्यु के चक्र से मुक्ति के लिए इस विज्ञान का सहारा लेना ही तंत्र के ज्ञान की सार्थकता है। अब अगर जीवन की इस अंतर्निहित ऊर्जा को विज्ञान की कसौटी पर देखें तो स्पष्ट हो जाता है कि धनात्मक और ऋणात्मक स्थितियों के संतुलन से बनी इतनी ऊर्जा का संचय होना और उसका स्थिर होना संभव नहीं। इन्हीं परिस्थितियों का प्रतीकात्मक स्वरूप हमारे सामने अर्धनारीश्वर के रूप में प्रकट किया गया है, जहां दोनों रूप संतुलित हैं। ऊर्जा के संचयन और संरक्षण के लिए जो सबसे विकसित पद्धति है, वही तंत्र के रूप में हमारे सामने है। तंत्र वो है जो शरीर को साधता है, मन को बांधता है और चित्त को स्थिर कर देता है। फिर शरीर और मन की हर इकाई उस परम तत्व की ओर अग्रसर होती जाती है। पदार्थ विज्ञान के सिद्धांत हो या वनस्पति विज्ञान के जीव संरचना की संकल्पना अथवा गणित और ज्योतिष या फिर बाइनरी सिद्धांत के सूत्र या कॉस्मिक एनर्जी आयाम, सब एक सिस्टम या तंत्र के अधीन काम करते हैं। मनुष्य के सफल जीवन के लिए तंत्र ने एक अद्भुत प्रणाली दी है। देवताओं के विभिन्न स्वरूप तंत्र के कारण हैं। योगियों और साधकों की विभिन्न मुद्राएं और स्वरूप का आधार तंत्र है। देवियों के विभिन्न रूपों और भाव भंगिमाओं के मूल में भी तंत्र ही है। तंत्र का ये संदेश सारे संसार के लिए है। यत्र नार्यस्तु पूज्यन्ते रमन्ते तत्र देवता। संसार के सभी भागों में तंत्र किसी न किसी रूप में विद्यमान है। सामान्य शब्दों में समझे तो सिस्टम या तंत्र को समझना ही समस्याओं के समाधान की ओर ले जाता है। प्रकृति की व्यवस्था को समझने और उसके साथ रहने का मार्ग हमें तंत्र बताता है। इतिहास की ये घड़ी चित्रों और चर्चा के सहारे तंत्र के उस विज्ञान को सरल तरीके से समझने का एक प्रयास है।
To understand Tantra, I am joined today by Professor Madhu Khanna, Tagore Fellow at the National Museum, noted academic. In recent years, I do not know of too many people who have done such a lot of work on Tantra. I am with her in the organization she has built, Tantra Foundation. Madhuji,
Namaskar.
welcome to Itihasa.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm truly grateful.
Let's start with the basics.
Yes.
A question that everyone has in mind. I know you yourself have said that that question cannot be answered. Even then, what is Tantra?
You know, when we think of the term Tantra, the word does not explain what it is, because Tantra has 19 meanings, the terminology, when we look at it etymologically. So I think the best way to look at Tantra is to look upon Tantra as one of the religious paths of self-realization that evolved in the post-medieval period. We knew about elements of Tantra in early Vedic times, but it was only after the 10th or 11th century that we find schools of Tantra emerging in Kashmir, in South India, in Bengal. And Tantra is not just localized to India. If you draw a straight line from Kashmir, cutting across the geoscape of India, and let it, you go to Burma, and then you move on to Thailand and, Malaysia, on to China. And in fact, just few days back, I was reading that there was this great tantric text, Mahavidya Tantra, which is written in Chinese, which was actually written in Nalanda, but transcribed in Chinese script. And then it traveled to Japan. So we have a Japanese form of Shignon Tantra. It was in China as well. And then down to Bali. Today, when I visited Bali about 4 years ago, most of the priestesses there, they have a very strong tradition of women priestesses. They say that they are performing tantric ritual and Vedic ritual. So Tantra is not limited to India. The geoscape is very, very
Out of the
expansive.
19 meanings, which
Yes.
one do you prefer? Is there
Well,
one
I
particular
prefer
meaning?
for this particular session, I think, Tantra is really a path of self-realization. It is a path of expansion of consciousness based on the divinity of the spirit, divinity of the self. And when we talk of expansion, I guess it's not just it sort of englobes everything. It means you start from your socially constructed identity of being who you are in the world, and yet you can expand to absorb the whole of cosmic consciousness. You can become the universe yourself.
So it's the sutra thread that's woven into everything.
Yes.
Sort of.
Sarvam Sarv Atmakam. Yat Pinde Tat Brahmande. In other words, that whatever is in the macrocosm is also in the microcosm. But it's an ancient philosophy. What we find is that it is also a worldview. It's not that,
You said post-medieval and you said 11th century. What about the other end of the timeline? To when would you date it? The beginnings?
The beginning. You see, for
I know
instance,
it's difficult to date, but the real
8th century we
expansion.
found some Gangadhar inscriptions, etc., where certain tantric deities were invoked. Before that, of course, there is the whole notion of the cosmicized body, the yogic body, which is mentioned in the Upanishads. You have the Chandogya Upanishad and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad speaking about the body mandala, which consists of 5 sheets. You have the Annamaya Kosh, the corporeal body, then you have the Pranamaya Kosh, which is the body of energy. Then you have the third, which is Manomaya Kosh, which is cognitive body, Vigyanmaya, which is intuitive apperception, I mean, there is a sort of a sheath, and then there is Anandmaya. So here this notion that, we are so many different people within ourselves. It's not just the corporeal frame. What is interesting about Tantra is that they've challenged this whole business of, you know, the materialistic and biological conception of the self.
How does, since you've done such a lot of work on Tantra, how does Tantra fit in with what is perceived to be the path of the Vedas? How do the Agama texts fit in with the Nigama texts?
Yes, you see, well, first of all, we have to really frame it within a larger context. So you have the Vedas, you have the Upanishads, you have the Purans, you have the Vedangas, and then you have the Kavyas, etc. It goes on and on. There's one line, Shruti, starting from Shruti. Parallel to that, you have the Agamas. There are 108 Agamas, Shaiva Agamas as well as Kashmirian Agamas. Many of them are known only through their titles. Many of them are found, very few of them are found. Now the Tantras, whether it is the Shaiva Tantra, the Shakta Tantra, and other Tantras as well, they really genetically connected to the Agamas. And Agamic tradition in many respects is Vedabhaya, some of part of it, because within Tantra you have three major sects. You have the Dakshinachara, which are closest to the Vedas. So there is a Vedantist form of Tantra which was in one sense propagated by Adi Shankaracharya through texts like Saundarya and the worship of Sri Yantra, which he started at the Sringeri Mutt as early as 9th century. And there's historical evidence to that. So this is amazing that how Shankaracharya was also inspired by certain aspect of the Shakta worship, which is totally Tantraized, but the interpretation is Vedic, is based on Shruti. But where you find the Bhairav Agamas, those Agamas, some of the Kaulachara tradition, which are sort of the Vama Margis, they are Vedabhaya in that sense. So in Agamas, you find a great synthesis, both of, in one sense, the Vedas as well as the non-Vedic tradition.
You mentioned Kashmir and you mentioned Bengal, two traditional centers.
Yes.
Were there any marked differences between the two?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Firstly, you see, Kashmir has been a great fountainhead, so has, of course, Bengal been a great fountainhead of knowledge from very early times. And Kashmir produced one of the greatest philosophers, luminaries of I would say, the world in one sense. He was a great synthesizer, unifier of knowledge, and he systematized the Trika Kaula system, and through that, you know, there were many other shrakas and prashakas. He had 19 gurus in his life, and he mastered each of the faiths that he studied and he experimented with or he internalized through his guru. And he has written on Kavya, he's written stotras, he's written, his greatest work is Tantra Lok, which runs into 35 volumes.
Which has still not been translated
Which has not
English.
been translated in English. Parts of it has been, but not entirely. It's a very esoteric text. That is the very nature of Tantric texts, because they have to be decoded. Not all texts can be read so easily. Tantric mantras have to be decoded. Tantric sadhanas have to be learn from a guru, because it's a lineage based tradition. Tantra never had a founder, you know, like Buddhism or Jainism. So it is a lineage based tradition, and what Abhinav Gupta did was really to create one of the most profoundest lineages and the greatest lineages of Tantra of his time, because we have names of the gurus and their works. So it was a very composite tradition, and it went on for centuries. It's not that 11th century and then it disappeared.
So in terms of what we were talking about earlier, Abhinav Gupta was in a way a kind of synthesis.
Yes, yeah. A great synthesis, unifier.
And what was the difference in Bengal?
Now Bengal, as S.C. Banerjee says, you know, in Bengal, he says, Bengal is more ritualistic. And Tantra came from below, because Bengal always have a very strong Brahmanical sort of umbrella, you know, in that sense. They were very strong Brahmins who would never allow these very revolutionary practices, you know, to be absorbed into the Brahmanical fold. But interestingly, Bengal, you know, the 6 Devi Purans were written in Bengal. Devi Puran, Mahabhagvat, Devi Bhagvat, etc. And there was an attempt by the Brahmins to absorb the Tantras, and that happens through the tradition of goddesses. So you have Durga, Kali. Now even goddess Kali, you know, was a forest deity in the earlier period, but later on, you know, her whole image gets very sweetened, although she continues with the tongue and, you know, disheveled hair and garland of skulls, etc. You know.
So going back a bit, Trika, you mentioned Trika. What is Trika?
Trika really means, you know, the three ultimate principles.
Shakti.
You know, Shiva, Shakti, Anu. Okay, this is a triad. It's a vision of the cosmic triad, and the whole universe can be understood in terms of cosmic triad, and therefore like Pramatri, Praman, Prameya, subject, object, and the mode of knowledge. And he goes into the phenomenology of knowledge.
So now let me bring in, because you mentioned we have different cells within ourselves. Now let me bring in the concept of chakras and kundalini.
Yes.
How does it fit into the picture?
You see, it fits firstly, chakras and kundalini is the greatest contribution of the tantras and the Nath yogis and other sort of traditions, smaller traditions that we know little, the siddhas for instance, the 64 siddhas. They were all practitioners of what is known as kundalini yoga. To understand kundalini yoga, we have to return to one basic concept. What is the tantric worldview? The tantric worldview is basically, it roots itself with the notion of cosmic biunity. There is Shiva, self-luminous, and who's pure chit or pure consciousness, and then you have Shakti, who's the cosmic energy or the power of his consciousness. Now Shakti is something, you know, Shakti is responsible for creation, for the manifestation of the entire universe and the material cosmos. She's known as Maya Shakti, she is known as Mahamaya, etc., and many other epithets she has. Now this Shakti, when she comes into when she's visualized in the microcosm, she's known as Kundalini Shakti. It's the same Shakti, because they are all monas. There's only single consciousness. But of course, our mind, when it's in bondage, we view that consciousness as being fragmented. And what the tantric devotee does, is really to centralize the fragmented energies into the central channel of his yogic body.
The Sushumna.
The Sushumna, which is a central axis. But what is interesting that, you know, is that they have built a whole map of the yogic body or the subtle body. The subtle body is an etheric double. It's known as Divya Deha. It's also known as Siddha Deha. It is in one sense beyond any form of temporal or spatial location. It's invisible. It's a body of energy, but it's beyond prana. It is a very subtle form of prana. And it is that body which is outside time and history. So, you know, the attestation of this form of yoga comes from the lives of the great saints that we know, like Aurobindo and Ramakrishna. They all had, you know, awakened their kundalini in one way or the other. Now the space of kundalini in the Sukshma Sharira is at the base of the spine, and that is Shakti, the Mooladhar, and the place of Shiva is on the Sahasrar, which is the 1,000-petal lotus. And the right side of the body is linked with the solar energies, and the left side, that is Pingala, and right is so how the notion of cosmic biunity gets absorbed and assimilated in the structure of the human body itself. And tantric yoga consists in rousing and awakening that energy and taking it, you know, through the chakras till it unites
the chakras have a link with the Dasha Mahavidyas also, do they not?
Not really, but the Dasha Mahavidya worship involves Kundalini Yoga.
Okay. So tell us about the Dasha Mahavidyas.
Yeah. Well,
and the iconography.
Oh my God.
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
You don't have to go through all 10. Suppose Chinnamasta, for example.
Oh my God, that's
symbolic.
Amazing. Yeah, yeah. So, well, Dasha Mahavidya is an eclectic group, number one, because it brings in all the goddesses from 3 to 4 different religious streams. So you have Kali and Tara, you know, from Eastern India itself. Then you have Bhuvaneshwari and Shodashi. Shodashi is coming from Kashmir. That's another name of Tripur Sundari. So then you have
which is Lalita Sahasranama.
Yes, Lalita Tripur Sundari, Bala Tripur Sundari.
Even
Saundarya Lahari is coming from that tradition. Then you have Chinnamasta who's a Buddhist deity. Tara was also a Buddhist deity earlier, but gets absorbed in the group of the 10 Mahavidyas. And then you have goddesses like Dhumavati and Matangi, who are really subordinate deities, you know, completely subaltern almost, coming from that sphere. Now, you know, to think of a goddess who is a widow is just amazing. I mean, only
Dhumavati.
Dhumavati is got a visage and she creates quarrels, and you know, she's ugly, and you know, she's only interested in creating quarrels everywhere. And but there's also interpretation given about Dhumavati that she embodies the last stage of the dissolution of the cosmos.
After Purusha has also gone.
Yes. So, but what is interesting about this group is that this is extremely popular group. And when you come to Chinnamasta, who's also a Buddhist deity, it's a very, very enigmatic iconography, because you have Chinnamasta below her, whether she's seated form or she's standing, below her is Kam and Rati in union, and that embodies creation, you know, creation of the cosmos. And she's decapitated her head and she's holding her head in her right hand, while her two attendant deities, Dakini and Varuni, are next to her, and there's a spurt of blood going out of her neck.
Three flows.
Three, yes. And you know, and they are being sort of absorbed by her head, and you know, they're just flowing out. Now, it really shows the whole dynamics of creation and dissolution at one level, but as symbols have many layered meanings. Very often, when people who meditate on the Chinnamasta figure, they see the three oozing out, sort of, you know, this blood spurting out into three channels as Kundalini Shakti and Ida and Pingala. So there is a whole, you know, dynamic, symbolic
famous temple to Chinnamasta in Rajarappa. Madhuji, Tantra has often had a very bad name, and that's largely because of Bhamachar, which you yourself mentioned. You didn't say it has a bad name, but you mentioned Bhamachar. So what is Bhamachar, and why does Tantra have this bad name?
You see, it's a very difficult practice, Vamachar, because it takes all the impure substances as a form of worship, but its philosophy is very high and profound. I won't go into it right now, but I'm very tempted, with your permission, to read a passage of defense of Vamachar. It's from Kularnava Tantra, chapter 2. What they say is, if by mere drinking of wine one were to attain fulfillment, all drunkards would reach perfection. Okay. If mere partaking of flesh were to lead to a high state, all flesh eaters in the world would come by immense merit. If liberation were to be ensured by mere cohabitation with a woman, all creatures would have stand liberated by female companionship. It is not Kaulapath which is to be denounced, but those who do not treat it in the high right spirit. So this, you know, sums up that the tradition requires the notion of bhoga is not unrestrained indulgence as far as the Kaulachars say. It is a very secret yogic practice, and it's meant for advanced devotees after they've gone through, you know, 2-3 different initiations. Is for the Virachars only, not for the Pashus. Divyachars don't need anything. So this is, and this has to be transmitted by a guru.
There's a key word you mentioned there. Earlier you mentioned Devi Bhagavat, and there is the Devi Gita. And the Devi Gita says the path of the Vedas is for those who have taken Diksha in it, and the path of Tantra is for those who have taken Diksha in it. So it is not something that one dabbles in without the Diksha.
Yes, without Diksha there is no awakening of the center of consciousness, because something elusive and something else goes which is beyond words. You know, when the Guru and Ramakrishna himself went to the Tantric Diksha, and when he touched Vivekananda's head, something happened to him. It was a Sparsha Diksha which happened. So Diksha is very important in this.
There is a wonderful exhibition going on, a traveling exhibition on art in, or rather Tantra in art.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. You see, first of all, I think one of the things which is essential when we speak about Tantra, its permeability and its instrumentality, because Tantra as a discipline has touched every facet of human life at one level, and also all possible disciplines that you find in all Shastras and all disciplines in the Indian subcontinent. For instance, there is whether it's alchemy, astronomy, astrology, all the pre-modern sciences, as well as, you know, kavya, as well as stotras, etc. The literature is vast. Now, what is interesting is Tantra is Kriya Pradhan Shastra in one sense, because it's interested, it's an experiential science of self-evolution, very revolutionary of course in its intent, but it's an experiential science that you have to, whether you're meditating or whether you're performing the rituals, you have to be in the act of it, you know, you have to experience it. And it is, the transmission is always through a guru, better still if it's a female guru, because the power flows through the feminine into the male or the female. This is a very important tantric element. So the question is that they required all kinds of visual symbols for their worship, because worship for them is...
Of which one is a yantra. So what is, we are running out of time, so what is a yantra?
Yantra is basically a sacred diagram. It's a nuclear diagram which condenses the energy of the deity and the cosmos. Yantra is activated by the mantra. Yantra and mantra are always together. Mantra is the sonic body of the deity, you know, the sound body, the nad. And yantra is that it's composed of geometrical elements with a bindu in the center. So it represents the wholeness of creation, and it's a psycho-cosmic symbol. In other words, you worship it outwardly as well as you internalize it. Now, Tantra has used many such most extraordinary visual symbols as a part of their worship,
which have been used in art also.
Art, oh yes, in ritual art particularly. Now, what happened was that, you know, when these symbols were, when the greater part of Tantra art was exhibited in an exhibition that took place in the late 70s in England, you know, a new door, new consciousness had risen among the artists, because they'd never seen an art which is ancient.
I have myself visited this exhibition. Madhuji, thank you very much for joining us and educating us about some aspects of Tantra. We could have gone on and on and on and on. Tantra is not very easy to explain. You have done a phenomenal job in explaining a little bit of it to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
In the next episode of Itihasa, join us to understand about the concept of Panchakanya or Panchasati. Tara, Ahalya, Kunti, Mandodari, some say Sita. Join us for a discussion to understand these concepts with Professor Koral Dasgupta.